So the term gamification's only really been around since about 2008. That's kind of the earliest occurrences that we've sort of been able to track. And there's this kind of apocryphal story, I'm not sure how true it is, that Gabe Zuckerman, who's a sort of marketing gamification guru, and Rajat Paharia of Bunchball, which is a gamification platform, got together and they were saying, we're doing this kind of thing about games, there's all this kind of different PR going around in different sort of terms. If we want to sell this thing, we're going to have to come up with one name for it, one thing that we can all kind of get together and get behind and sell it. And so they basically over coffee came up with this term gamification and decided to go with that, and that's what would be gamification. And as you can see here, beginning of January 2011, this red line is the number of Google searches. This is Google Trends, by the way, really useful tool. The number of Google searches for gamification is growing, and this blue line is the number of Google searches for serious games. And so, about kind of April, May, June of 2011, the number of searches for gamification has gone above and beyond the number of searches for serious games. It was around kind of late 2009 with the launch of Foursquare that this kind of blueprint for kind of what gamification has kind of really appeared. And Foursquare kind of like kicked off sort of this kind of idea of sort of blending elements from games into kind of service applications. And you can kind of see that more and more digital products and services have kind of taken on these kind of concepts of applying elements from games, sort of design tropes, ideas from video games. The industry blueprint is kind of pretty simple and still pretty much just copies exactly what Foursquare did, which is basically points, badges, leaderboards, and incentives, and kind of applying kind of behavioral analytics and kind of looking at the data that's generated from use and really kind of tuning your system kind of on a minute by minute often basis based on kind of user feedback and user engagement. Kind of open to discussion is whether things like points, badges, leaderboards, etc. are actually really critical to games, whether they're actually a core part of games or not. But that seems to be kind of the kind of sets of phenomena that gamified applications and services really have. Here's kind of a partial list of all the different sort of talking heads, all the people who are kind of pushing these kind of ideas, sort of talking about it, writing about it, talking at conferences, etc. Sort of people like Gabe Zuckerman, Amy Jo Kim, Byron Reeves, Jeremy Barnacle, Jesse Schell. They all have slightly different takes on kind of gamification, slightly different takes on kind of putting games into kind of non-game contexts. So just to kind of situate our little definition of gamification, gamification's here, and we've seen all sorts of examples of kind of using games in here. So the idea of kind of having fully fledged games, sort of health games, serious gaming, simulation training, serious games themselves, pervasive games, which are about kind of extending games in various sorts of ways, playful design, kind of serious toys, ludic design, the sort of little game stuff in here. And so we've got game elements in here, sort of an aspect of using games, but it's all kind of contained within this kind of bigger container, this bigger object, which is about the ludification of culture, about how kind of digital games are affecting culture in general, affecting the way that we experience the world. So here's our nice simple definition. So gamification is the use of game design elements in non-game context. We see that gamification is about gaming, not about that kind of playful end. And I think one of the common critiques that's kind of come out about gamification is that it's not very playful and it's not very open. We don't actually limit gamification to any particular context or use. And I think we've got a number of interesting examples here from a number of academic projects that came along to one of our workshops. Things like eco-driving, energy conservation, mapping geographical dietary patterns. There's a whole bunch of different situations where gamification can be used. And so what we're saying is that it's not entertainment, which is kind of where games will be. Games are ostensibly for entertainment, that's kind of what we're assuming. And so what we're kind of saying is that when it's being used outside of an entertainment context for a non-game context, that's a possible example of gamification. So just come back to the definition again. So it's the use of game design elements in non-game contexts. So that kind of bringing it all together graphically, bringing those kind of two continuums of sort of gaming versus playing, whole versus elements. We see kind of gamification sort of being situated here as in this quadrant between sort of elements and gaming, so the pieces of games and the pieces of games, as opposed to elements of playing or aspects of playing, which would be part of playful design, ludic design, playful experiences kind of put into products. Whole gaming kind of used in non-gaming contexts is what serious games are for, a variety of serious games, whether they be training games or games for change or anything like that. And then kind of finally the whole playful experience, sort of toys, playgrounds, things like that. So then finally, kind of moving beyond, I'm going to kind of end with a qualifier, kind of a shift in focus, and some discussion points that we sort of drew out in some of the events that we've ran, some of the kind of key things that we see as kind of big issues or areas for research, areas for, I think, also people who sort of, for practitioners, designers, game designers who are actually working in this field to kind of engage with and start to answer. So one is kind of the social and subjective nature of play. So this sort of definition seems quite hard and fast and quite definite. And we kind of hope, and I certainly personally feel, that it's not there to do that as kind of a generative definition. It's a definition that hopefully opens up the discussion for what gamification is and provides us with some kind of new directions to think about how we can do gamification or how we can apply gamification. But I think one of the key kind of aspects to always bear in mind is that there is a kind of that gaming and playing are kind of a very kind of personal, subjective, phenomenological sort of set of phenomena, the kind of a shared mode of behaviour and mindset, which are not easy to kind of nail down and define. So we can kind of look at the kind of user view or the player view of sort of when there's a piece of software that's being gamified, are you using the piece of software or are you playing it? Are you using an application or are you playing an application? Are you using a game or playing a game? And I think within that there's some sort of empirical user research that can sort of be carried out on various applications or even across applications to kind of understand people's attitudes toward them. I think another point of view is also the sort of designer's point of view on these things, is that whether you're intending something to be playful or gameful or gamified. Are you intending it as a kind of gamified product, or are you intending it to be just a used product? And I think people can use things in much different ways from what the designers intend. I think this kind of leaves us with this kind of idea of gamification as sort of being this kind of flickering, switching, and allowing for kind of conflicting modes of interpretation, which is kind of similar to what Catherine Hales calls kind of flickering signifiers. So they're kind of very kind of postmodern, mixed up, hyper-contextualized way of kind of thinking about whether something's gamified or not. So I think one of the other movements that we've sort of done, the sort of shift, is to try and move away from talking about gamification, because gamification is an incredibly loaded word now. I mean, you saw that Google search graph at the beginning, is that there are lots of people kind of searching on it. There's a lot of expectation about what it means. There's a lot of kind of, even very quickly in the space of a year, there's a lot of kind of ossification of what it kind of means, and that it is this kind of four-square blueprint, badges, leaderboards, points kind of way of approaching things. And a lot of people that are selling gamification, selling them sort of consulting services, there's lots of people trying to sell various kind of platforms, things like Bunchball, things like Scavenger, that will provide kind of gamified services, and they are kind of in this simple model. So one way I think, and we quite like the idea, or certainly I quite like the idea of gamefulness that Jane McGonigal's talked about, is kind of a corollary to playfulness.